Americans are either going to lose health insurance or pay a lot more for the healthcare premiums. Now I'd like to talk about war crimes. Last week, Secretary Hegseth lied and denied media reports that the U.S. military ordered a second strike on defenseless shipwreck survivors. Then yesterday, both the White House and Hegseth said actually it was Admiral Bradley who ordered the second strike. I served on active duty as a JAG for 4 years and then an additional 21 years in the reserves. And let me be very clear, killing shipwreck survivors is a war crime. The Pentagon's own Department of Defense law manual on the law of war literally says that, quote, orders to fire upon the shipwreck will be clearly illegal. The Department of Justice must conduct an investigation into the war crime and hold all those accountable, including Secretary Hegseth. He allegedly said, quote, kill them all. If the Trump administration does not hold the people accountable, I guarantee you a future administration will do so because there is no statute of limitations for war crimes. And now I have a message for the members of the United States military. Thank you for your service to our great nation. And for those of us who served, we know that we all followed a code of conduct. And part of that code of conduct is to not lie and to accept responsibility. Unfortunately, the head of the Department of Defense, Secretary Hegseth, engaged in dishonorable conduct. He stated on national TV, quote, I watched it live. We knew exactly who was in that boat. And instead of accepting responsibility for what happened, Hegseth chose to throw Admiral Bradley under the bus. Shame on Pete Hegseth. He is a coward. He must resign. You deserve better.
What you about to watch wasn't kabuki or a soundbite. It was a raw moment where the basic obligations of leadership, law, and conscience collided with political cover-up. Representative Ted Lieu's language was blunt because the subject is blunt. The allegation that U.S. forces struck shipwreck survivors isn't a typo in a newsfeed. It's the kind of act that, if proven, would cross a bright legal and moral line every country swears not to cross. That's why Lieu's fury matters, and why this exchange matters for everyone who still believes the United States should live up to its own standards. Start with the simplest, clearest point. Under the law of armed conflict, people who are out of combat, wounded, shipwrecked, or otherwise hors de combat are protected. Deliberately targeting those people is not just policy malpractice. It is what every credible manual of the law of war labels a war crime. That's not partisan rhetoric. It's a legal threshold that triggers investigations, potential criminal liability, and an obligation on civilian leaders to be forthright. When Lieu names it plainly, killing shipwreck survivors is a war crime, he's invoking a line that the country, historically, has treated as sacrosanct. If senior leaders are cavalier about this, the consequences are enormous. Legal exposure for service members, damage to alliances, and a lasting stain on our national honor. Second, the exchange exposes the danger of buck passing and secrecy inside the chain of command. According to the transcript, Secretary Hegseth initially denied the media account and later pointed to Admiral Bradley as the officer who issued the order. That sudden shifting of responsibility is what Lieu calls throwing Admiral Bradley under the bus. It's a classic accountability failure. When things go wrong, leaders should own the process of fact-finding, disclose what they know, and, if necessary, accept responsibility. Instead, obfuscation multiplies suspicion. Saying we saw it live one day and then distancing yourself the next deepens the public's worry that truth is being buried to avoid consequences. Third, the legal and institutional remedies are clear and they're urgent. Congress has oversight tools, subpoenas, public hearings, war powers checks, and the Department of Justice has an obligation to investigate credible allegations of unlawful killings by U.S. forces. The Uniform Code of Military Justice and federal criminal statutes can reach grave misconduct, but those processes require transparency, access to tapes, orders, communications, and after-action reports. Lieu's demand for a DOJ probe and for accountability isn't a partisan attack. It's a constitutional and legal demand so that the country can know whether wrongdoing occurred and who bears responsibility. Fourth, there's a moral and practical leadership problem. Military culture depends on trust. Troops must trust that their commanders will give lawful orders and take responsibility for mistakes. The public must trust that the military will act within law and honor. When a Secretary of Defense appears more interested in deflection than in truth-seeking, it corrodes both. It's not just a personality critique. It's about preserving a culture in which lawful restraint is taught, practiced, and enforced. If the head of the department won't be accountable, the chain of command frays, and those on the front lines pay the price. Finally, this is about consequences and prevention. The right immediate steps are straightforward. Release the tapes and relevant communications. Let independent investigators, whether the DOJ, the Inspector General, or a bipartisan congressional panel, examine the facts, and suspend involved personnel pending the outcome if the evidence warrants. If those investigations find unlawful conduct, prosecutions and administrative accountability must follow. If they clear the actions, then a full public accounting is still necessary to rebuild trust. Silence, denials, or scapegoating are the worst possible responses. What you can do right now matters. Ask your senators and representatives to demand full transparency. Call for the immediate release of strike tapes and related records. Support or urge an independent, well-resourced investigation. Insist Congress use its war powers and oversight authorities to get answers, and raise your voice in public media and on social platforms to keep pressure on the institutions charged with answering these questions. Democracy only works when citizens insist on the truth. This moment is painful because it forces a choice. Either we hold our institutions to the legal and moral standards we profess, or we let expedience and secrecy rewrite what's permissible. Representative Liu's anger reflects a larger public imperative. In a democracy that claims to be governed by law, alleged war crimes can't be shuffled away.
Energy suppliers don't want you to know about this trick to warm up houses for practically zero cost. This brilliant invention was created by two Australian engineers from one of the largest supply companies in the country. They were tired of seeing people paying insane heating costs during the winter and facing extremely high energy bills due to inflation. So, they decided to create a groundbreaking portable heater capable of instantly heating any room without the high costs. Experts agree it's just as effective as traditional domestic or gas heating, but costs hundreds of dollars less each year. The two Australian engineers, William Harvey and Edward Gibson, knew that traditional heating systems
The boat was hit that first time, which she says led to the second hit. Also today, we're expecting the unclassified version of a Pentagon watchdog report on Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's use of the messaging app Signal when he discussed sensitive military operations back in March. And as we told you first on CNN, sources say the report found that Hegseth's messages risked endangering U.S. troops, among other things. CNN's Elena Treen is live at the White House. There's a lot that is going to be happening today. How much are we going to learn about it? What are you hearing from there?
Yeah, a lot of attention, Kate, on the Pentagon and specifically, of course, Secretary Hegseth between these two things that we're going to see happening. I want to start with this briefing, this really high stakes anticipated briefing that Admiral Bradley is going to be giving to members of the House and Senate Armed Services Committee. It's going to be closed door, as you mentioned. It's going to be classified. But what he's expected to tell lawmakers could be crucial to trying to rebut the claims from legal experts as well as some Democratic lawmakers that that second strike on that boat back in September could have amounted to a war crime. He's expected to say essentially that after that first attack,